All right. Welcome one, welcome all. Welcome to another episode of Fan Team Radio. I am your host, Shayem Khan, joined as always by my co-host Chris Odorizzi. Chris, what's up?
Hey, Cheyenne. Man, Silverstone. Love this track. Great race. One of the races that I desperately want to go to in the future. Such a great track, such prestige in the British community. First Grand Prix was in 1950, 52 laps. It's a length of 5.8 kilometers or 3.66 miles. And just give a little shout out to my boy Max Verstappen, who has the track record. So, but yeah, man, what a great race. Did you like it?
Yeah, man. It was they broke the record for attendees this year, 480,000. Seems like a lot of people gravitated towards this race. I wonder why, with so many Brits in the grid representing. So, really great to see. Great atmosphere. The weather
So,
wasn't too
so
big
many,
of
so
a.
many. Was it Brits or B Pitts? LOL. Brad Pitt was
Uh,
in the scene. I mean,
uh,
there was like a
uh,
thousand ladies there just to see Mr. Pitt at the track. So
yeah, and probably more than that, guys, to see Mr. Pitt. That man is just all around awesome.
yeah, love him. Actually, we just watched Babylon the other day. What a great film, but a little crazy. I don't know if you've seen it, but also I saw Shakira in the crowd again. It's the third time she's been at the track lately.
Yeah,
Who's she seeing?
I don't know. She's probably making her own vie-in for owning a team.
Yeah, or dating Mr. Hamilton, possibly, maybe rumors, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to the race. It was crazy race. Thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I mean, obvious. Let's call a spade here. McLaren upgrades are looking quite nice. This was week over week, so it gives them a little bit of credence. Now that they have it, last week was it just for Lando, and then this week is for Oscar and for Lando. You saw exactly how they use their cars. So yeah, let's dissect that into that a little bit more. What were your first thoughts on McLaren, Chris?
Yeah, McLaren, this is like I think the second or third week in a row where I wish Q1 in qualifying was Q3, just because it was the insanity of the track evolution. I think Norris would have been on pole if Q1 had been Q3. And but yeah, the McLaren pace just sort of really has sort of taken me by surprise. Who knew? You just had to add a little chrome to the car and it starts going faster, which Norris has been asking for years. Change the livery, make it chrome again. And so yeah, I don't know what magic that they're pulling at the factory. I don't know if they've had this in the plan for a long time. I don't know if it's been slight tweaks that they've done, but whatever they're doing seems to be working. And just like I mentioned last week, it was either last week or the week before, but all these other teams seem to be progressing a lot. And it makes me worried for teams like Aston. But yeah, McLaren today came right out of the gate. Lando and Oscar straight off the line. I don't know whether Max got a bad start or whether their start was just fantastic, but the performance of the car looks spectacular from the moment the lights went out.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. So great off the line for both of them. And even more impressive is in the ensuing laps, they kept the same pace. So if you remember, this was probably the second race of the year where Max caught himself sandwiched in between the Mercedes. And I had mentioned how the Mercedes, if they could use that as a tactic, they could potentially, have a decent, a gap between Red Bull as opposed to letting them run away. Same thing kind of applied here today. I think Max had a decent start off the line, but I think Lando and Oscar were able to position themselves on the inside of that first turn so well in it had a similar effect to what Mercedes did earlier this year on Red Bull. So, you know, Max overtakes Norris with DSR, which we expected to happen. It happened, in lap five. So for 5 laps, Lando was able to keep a significant, lead in respects to how whatever that means in this season for Max. And then the gap between Piastri and Leclerc for third was way higher than the DRS range allowed for. So it shows that McLaren's pace to Red Bull was, not on par or the exactly the same, but that McLaren had uh a much faster car than Ferrari did going into this race. So um by lap 13, Norris was still only 3 seconds behind Max. So it's hard to tell if it's just because Max wanted to kind of conserve his tires, but that delta didn't really go up a whole lot. So, it shows signs of promise for McLaren that they're reaching pace that's far more consistent with Mercedes. I think if you were to ask me, Mercedes and McLaren probably were on similar standings in terms of pace. Mercedes obviously had a tough qualifying, which kind of started them in a tougher position in the starting grid. So that probably kind of led to the George not, and then also George had a tough race as well. So, I think they're both on par with each other. I think what you mentioned about them being a little bit ahead of Aston Martin right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but that definitely was, we could see that on the grid today. By lap 40, Max had the fastest lap, and Hamilton almost tried to overtake Norris but couldn't pull it off. And then Russell commented on how impressive they are. So, both Mercedes drivers kind of nodded their hats towards McLaren today. So under the hood, this is from ESPN reporting. So Andrea Stella, he points to the inspiration of the new body updates was from Red Bull, right? He
Right.
even said that the photos from Monaco from the undercarriage of the Red Bull of Checo's car contributed a lot to their own design and where they might have been missing something, right? And he was transparent about it. It seemed like it's just a part of the culture, borrowing, taking photos, like it's just how teams kind of reach that parity gap. Um, but he also tipped his hat to Peter Prodromo. He's a leading aerodynamic developer at McLaren. He said, he's doing an exceptional job in terms of setting the conceptual direction, but also having organized and having inspired the entire aerodynamic team. So whatever Peter's doing over there has been working well, and the quick turnaround. It's scary to see as a Mercedes fan, but it's exciting to see as a F1 fan overall in terms of the competitiveness at the front of the grid. Um, so it's something that is promising for McLaren. The one thing I will say though for Norris today, he had two track violations. Towards the end of the race, he was in jeopardy. If Lewis could have probably pushed him a little bit further in the last 6 to 7 laps and made him mess up, he would have gotten a third track violation and would have been off podium. So that was the only kind of red flag, sort of say in the race today for Piastri and Norris. But other than that, they stuck it really well. Did you have any reservations about McLaren's race today? Anything that you saw that wasn't up to par?
No, I mean, I actually think that they played it really well. Like go back to sort of their first few laps. I have like a stupid conspiracy theory that Max is really good friends with Norris, and so he kind of kept him in DRS to kind of pull him along a little bit. But I don't want to take anything away from them because I think they actually did improve their car significantly in Norris and Piastri, and I think Piastri is the real deal. Both of them are stellar drivers, but I think that they played it really well because I think that they were able to sort of stay within that DRS range of each other and of Max in the first opening laps, which let them sort of escape the pack. Because once they got out of DRS range of, Max's car is already a rocket ship. So if they're like being pulled along by Max in like this like DRS drift, then they're being basically pulled away from the rest of the pack, which I think ultimately was smart. McLaren didn't let or didn't they told Norris that Piastri wasn't going to attack him. They were going to keep the position and just sort of play it as is. And I think that was super smart for them. My biggest, and we could talk more when we get into the safety car bit, but I think the only blunder I have about Mercedes or McLaren was the decision to put them on the hard tires. That gave them an unnecessary quarrel against Mercedes at the end. That fortunately they were able to sort of hold them off, but it was one of those things where we had just seen George do what 31 laps on softs, which
20,
is
29.
yeah, but they were 2 lap old softs from qualifying. And so there was actually 2 extra laps on those tires because they weren't brand new at the start of the race. And so yeah, he did 29 in race laps, but 31 total, which was like kind of mind-boggling because I actually rewatched the footage of him pitting, and his tires did not look destroyed. They looked clean. And I was kind of confused by that just because I was like, he could have done the whole race on softs essentially. So, but after McLaren sees that, I don't understand why they wouldn't, put him on softs for the last like whatever 15 laps, whatever it was to go.
Yeah, Norris had mentioned like in lap 39, when they fitted Hamilton with used soft tires and he was on new hards, he was like, "Hey, is this what we're doing right now?" And like almost, Norris did have a bit of a snark to him with his
Yeah.
engineers throughout the race, and that's just kind of how he is as a driver, I guess. But he mentioned it, like, "Hey, why are we on hards?" But I will say the hards fared well better for them than they did Ferrari today. Ferrari tried the same tactic towards the end, and their car is slower. It just kind of showed that, even though McLaren like had to kind of get those hards up to, uh, get heat in tires right before, in I think the last like 11 laps or so, they were able to keep pace. Piastri should have kept. He lost, unfortunately, lost a position in that safety car snafu, but they were able to keep pace. They were able to kind of, Lando was able to hold Hamilton off, and um, I think. Do you ever think that maybe they're just getting too good too quick, and the engineers just need to get used to how to become a really good team?
Actually, I had that was actually a main thought I had. I was about to bring up was that sometimes I feel like these backmarker teams or the midfield teams, they're not used to being at the front and making front runner decisions. And like it sounds weird because all these people are like top in class, best of the best. These are the guys that like they're making F1 cars. Like it's like rocket science. But the engineers coming over the radio twice to Norris asking him, how many laps could you do on this tire? And it's like, I don't know. You tell me. You can see the degradation. You can see the track data. You can see every other car's data. Why are you not telling me how many laps I could do on this tire? Like, it was so weird to hear them asking him twice and Norris both times kind of giving him a snarky response like, I don't know. Feels
Like,
good to
like,
me.
what do you want from me? Yeah, it's like, what do you want from me?
I'm keeping pace. I'm doing what it is. You tell me. So that was kind of like it's one of those situations that they're sort of like not too worried about it in other races because it's like you're gonna finish eighth or 10th or out of the points, and you're not really thinking about that. Now you're like, holy shit, we have to maintain second and third place for this race. How like all of a sudden we need engineers to sit there and think about what are all these details that are going to keep us to do it. And I think ultimately that might be why they went on the hard tire versus the soft, just because they were like the hard's safe. We know it's there. We know it's a new tire, not a used tire, and we know it can perform. So let's just throw you on the safe bet. Um, and ultimately, the safety car was a lot longer than a lot of people expected. So there was a lot less laps to actually do at race pace. But I think that McLaren might have lucked out. I mean, not lucked out, but the DRS not being active for those first two laps of a restart after a safety car, allowed them to warm up those tires and get them in the zone where they could race against the softs. But it was definitely close. And ultimately, I think Lewis probably could have passed Norris if he had like stuck it a little harder, but maybe flashbacks of taking Max out in a cop's corner, like he pulled out a little bit because it was close in that one corner and he pulled out. And I thought maybe he could have stuck it, but who knows? Maybe Norris could have gotten him back with the RS because their car seemed to be a rocket ship. And kudos to them for putting together what hopefully for the rest of the season is going to be a huge shakeup and see them on the podium some more.
Yeah, just babies of the brainchild that is Adrian Newey.
Yep.
So let's talk about a team that is kind of going on the downturn, unfortunately. Aston Martin's initial pace has now been met by McLaren, obviously, and Mercedes. And there's a chance that they've used a decent amount of their budget already in the first quarter of the season. Um, they had upgrades to their car for the Canadian Grand Prix. Mike Crack mentioning that hard tire performance was significantly better than the soft tire performance. But even today, Alonso is only able to defend his P7 position, although I thought he did a great job at defending that. He had a whole train of cars behind him trying to overtake. And I think Perez was the only one that was able to successfully do it. Gasly was like, I think 0.5 seconds behind him for almost like, 2/3 of the race. And then, you know, baby Stroll got P14 and he knocked Gasly, out of track limits to do it. So, what are your thoughts on Aston Martin? Do you think this is a team that maybe jump? I don't have a good rated G metaphor for this, but do you think they blew their load too quick? Or do you think that it's a combination of that and maybe McLaren and Mercedes using their budgets to, progress, conservatively over the course of the season as opposed to front ending it with a whole lot of development? Like, what are your thoughts on Aston Martin right now?
Listen, this is going to be probably a very uneducated guess, but my opinion is that Red Bull Racing built the absolute perfect car that you could build at the beginning of the season, and it's led them to pure domination to where at this point they don't need to develop the car. And I think Aston Martin did almost that at the beginning of the season. I think that they built a very good car that was an above and beyond the rest. And all of a sudden you went from them last year just in nowhere land to Alonso being on the podium every week and just sort of, and that was almost a definitive, like it was expected. Alonso was on the team radio every week saying what a lovely car this is to drive, how fast it is, competing like crazy. And I think other teams were basically scrambling. How do we copy Red Bull? How do we make our car faster? And I think Aston Martin maybe was focusing on next year's car potentially a little bit more because they felt like they had a little bit of this in the bag. But I think other teams probably put a lot, I think Aston, like you said, maybe put a lot of budget into the beginning of the year and didn't have enough. And other teams are sort of developed a car and had the opportunity to sort of, like you said, McLaren mimic Red Bull a little bit, figure out new designs and improve. And Aston is now at that stage where they're like, shit, we need to do that. So now they're going to go back to the drawing board. The problem is going to be, do you put that budget into this year's car? Do you put it into next year's car? And but yeah, I think, and we'll talk a little bit about Stroll, but that guy confuses the hell out of me. One weekend we're like, oh my god, that guy just had hand surgery and fucking, put it to the max, and then the next week he's just bumping guys off the track. Although I think if you rewatch, it might have been a little bit more on Gasly, but ultimately Stroll still has a lot of
He had
issues.
space. And Stroll had space in that turn to give Gasly room to be in the outside of that turn.
I,
But he
I
chose to overcut and then kind of pull him out.
I need to rewatch it again. But I saw multiple people talking about how Gasly essentially turned into him when he didn't have to. But I have to go rewatch it again. Either way, Stroll has had an awareness problem for a very long time, and he's definitely not on par with Alonso. I mean, Fernando, what, qualified P9, finished P7. Stroll qualified P12 and finished P14. Like, there's obviously a huge gap in performance, and yeah, I think Aston Martin's going to have a lot of troubles, both keeping Alonso in the top three of drivers and keeping, Aston Martin in the top three of constructors. I think they're going to keep going backwards for the time being.
Yeah, especially with the I guess their only saving grace right now is Alpine's demise, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I think Aston Martin, again, they hold their budgets close to their heart. So, if anything, I would assume is that they put a lot of development into that front end of the year, and as you mentioned, kind of rested on their laurels once they saw the first few races and the success there. But what they, I guess, discounted was other teams like McLaren and Mercedes, really, developing in season in a way that takes into consideration a 20 plus race season, right? We're almost halfway through. And, if all of your development was in the first couple of races of the season, now there's, room for Mercedes and McLaren to just kind of overtake in development in very similar ways as they do on track. So, yeah, I think Aston Martin. I would love to see them make another adjustment in season, and get them up to being competitive with McLaren. This just kind of goes to say that Lance Stroll probably not the right guy for the job, especially if he's kind of qualifying outside of P10, but then also finishing outside of P10 as well. So a lot of things for Aston Martin to consider going into the second half of this season. Uh, let's let's pivot a little bit to our winners this week. There's a couple of them, so we'd love to hear who your winners are, and if you could start with Max Verstappen and kind of just in the scope of other racers that have been winning consecutive races, where would you put this, Chris?
I mean, Max is on the cusp here of making history, and I think he knows it. And but he seems pretty calm, cool, collected. I mean, he's at this race, he became the fifth driver to win six consecutive races. Other famous races like Schumacher, Vettel, and Rosberg have done this, but surprisingly, Hamilton's actually never done that, which is kind of mind blowing to me considering how dominant he is and how people have talked about his domination. He's never won more than five in a row. Um, that just blew my mind. But Verstappen's on a run here to take Vettel's record of nine, and the only one to be at nine. Ascari, Schumacher, and Rosberg have seven. So one more win, and I think it's incredibly doable. I mean, Max has won Hungary before. I think Spa is going to be an easy win for Red Bull. And I forget the track in between, but I definitely, or yeah, Zandvoort, which Max has won back to back. So I think there's a huge chance for Max to tie and then potentially beat the record coming back off the summer break, barring any kind of reliability issues. I don't think people are going to progress their cars past Red Bull in the next three races. So, but yeah, he's on the hot streak. I kind of want to see him break records, although I love, Seb. So kind of like to have him hold records too. So, but yeah, Max is on the tear, and it's just quite impressive what they're doing, especially given Checo's performance in comparison, because Checo has been in nowhere land. I think it's the fifth race in a row. He has not made Q3 and just kind of moving up the pack. That's not what a Red Bull driver should be doing. So whatever Max is doing is just pure perfection.
Yeah, he's having as close to a perfect season as you can have, even the nooks and crannies, in setting the fastest laps per race. And it's great to see. As a Mercedes fan, it's tough to see, but I'll take greatness as it comes, just like I did with LeBron, just like I did with Tom Brady.
I mean, Mercedes has 203 constructor points, and they're in second place. Max has 255 on his own, which is just ridiculous.
It's it's an engineering sport, and
Yeah.
I'll just wait to see what kind of engineering these other teams are able to do to get anywhere close to Red Bull, and especially going into next season, right? Like, now that all these teams are kind of copying essentially the playbook, right? It's essentially Red Bull has the playbook. Um, and how do you optimize your cars to fit that? A big thing that Mike Crack did mention in that article leading up to the Canadian GP and their upgrades there is that even if you emulate certain parts of the Red Bull car or whatever car is the most successful that year, you have to take into consideration that your own car is optimized for your own design. So to change just the body of it isn't going to fix the trick, right? You have to change the body while taking into consideration other pieces of your structure, like your chassis, your wheels, like your undercarriage, your floor, like all of that has to be orchestrated in a way that is optimized for that body. If you put the Red Bull body just by itself on an Alpine right now, it's probably gonna suffer in performance. So for a lot of things for them to consider right there, uh, going into next season. And by them I mean teams that are emulating Red Bull and actually have a good runway to get to success. Uh, I'd be curious to see what 2024, 2025 looks like before the 2026 shifts again, just to see now that there's a blueprint for what's great looks like, if other teams are going to be able to copy that over the course of, the second half of this season, off season, and then going into next season. So, winners this week, Chris, who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, besides Max, like obviously it's McLaren. Qualifying P2, P3, and then keeping that pretty dominant throughout the entire race. Unfortunately, Piastri lost out on the safety car shambles, which I was actually not expecting a safety car in this race. Even though Julian Palmer, I think it was prior to the race, said that Silverstone has a 90% safety car happening rate, which is like kind of mind-boggling. But the race seemed pretty like spread out, pretty even. Wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't a lot of like crazy battles for once the pack got settled. So I was sort of expecting once the pit stops happened to sort of flow to the end. But we have what seems to be unreliable Ferrari engines in the Haas, because Haas has had issues with this, so is Alfa Romeo. And so unfortunately, the car blew up, stuck on track, and it kind of screwed over Piastri. Hamilton got sort of the better end of that. But either way, P4 as a rookie in your 10th race in F1, and knowing that you would have been on the podium, barring some shenanigans, and then Norris putting it up on the podium, holding his position, having a great fight with Max and with Hamilton, like he belongs up there. So yeah, great performance from McLaren today. And then I also have Mercedes, because where did Lewis start? I think it was like P7. Yeah, P7. Like
Yeah.
taking P7 to a podium finish is fantastic.
Yeah, he
Like,
he lost to several positions off the start. He didn't have a great start. I think he went down to like P9 and then climbed his way back up.
yeah, like just super happy. Like watching Lewis celebrate on the podium, especially with his fellow Brit, and just being up there, like seeing how happy he was with his family. His brother was there, his mom and dad, and just like he's having the time of his life. Also, I think that was Lewis's 11th straight Silverstone podium, which was also kind of mind-boggling. A lot of cool stats being put up at this track. 14 total for him. But yeah, just happy to see him back up on the podium. So I think, besides Max, which is just going to sort of be in the definitive winners column for the rest of the year, most likely, is just, McLaren, Mercedes. What a great showing by both of them today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the Queen, rest her soul, knighted my boy. He is the only knighted race car driver on the track. So, it just makes sense that he's as dominant as he is at Silverstone. My winners of the week, of course, McLaren. The only thing I would say is I just need to see it week over week, right? To
Right.
really feel comfortable and fortified that this is who they are, and that this isn't a fluke. But fluke or not, this week was stellar for them. Great in qualifying. Car looks super sturdy. It looks strong, and it looked reliable. It looked like it could do well on whatever kind of set of tires you put on it, which is a great sign for them. I'm gonna go on to saying Williams is another winner for this week. Alex Albon came in at P8, such a strong race. Just that race for P10 through P7 right behind Alonso was super tight, and he made the most out of it. He got they had a really decent pit stop for both him and Logan Sargent. So, Logan coming in at P11, just outside of points. But if we were talking about ranking rookies after this week, it'd probably be Oscar Piastri a lot further ahead. And then right after him would be Logan Sargent. There is some sort of incremental, progressiveness that he's taking. And then all the way at the end, I put, Nick DeVries. Um, so Williams, being a British team, Albon being, a Thai Brit, it was just great to see, right? And he's keeping in points. Love to see that from Williams. And then my third winner for the week is just the British fans and Britain at large. They had four Brits in the top 10, two in the top three. As a fan, if we had four American racers win, Chris, and we were at Coda while this happened, the crowds would go nuts. Like
Yep.
people would start fighting, like just how Americans do, like
Shooting their guns in the air.
yeah, like that's how we show our love for our fellow countrymen.
Yeah.
So thank God that didn't happen in America because that would have been dangerous. But in Britain, it probably wasn't as dangerous.
So
Um,
I want to bring up for about Williams.
yeah,
Um, I was slightly disappointed, just because in FP1, FP2, and FP3, I don't know if you saw that, but like Logan and Alex were both topping the time charts,
yeah,
like putting it up there. And once quali started, they weren't as dominant. And I think that had a lot to do with the rain, the changing conditions, temperatures, or just other teams maybe figuring things out. But I was kind of hoping to see, like a random, front row start from Alex Albon and like a Logan Sargent in the second or third row. But yeah, ultimately, like you said, Alex Albon was just, dominant performance, like the way he was like passing signs on track and things like that. Like it was such a great performance by him. Random thing about him that I learned, I don't know if you saw the interview with him post race, or post quality. He was giving an interview on like we're like sitting outside the paddock, and someone was like, "Are you injured?" And his back was there's blood all over the back of his shirt. And he's like, "Oh, is there?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, he goes, "Every single time that I drive in the car, quality," he goes, "every single race, the G forces that I experience rip my skin open every single time." And I was like, "Holy F, that is awful." And he's like, "Yeah, if I took off my shirt and I showed you my back, it's just like cuts and blisters and bruises from the G forces." He says that my back rips open every race, it heals just in time for the following week. And I was like, my God, this guy.
man,
Yeah.
you,
And
you
I
need to
was
put
just
some you need to put some Ben Gay on that.
I was like, can someone like get some lotion or something to get this man?
So my man's chafing and going through G-force. Like someone give him some like Alka-Seltzer. Like give him something. Like he, that's crazy. I didn't know about that. That's
Yeah. I when I first heard that, I was like, someone get this man out of the sport or something, because that's seems really dangerous. And I was like, I wonder if any other drivers go through this. But yeah, like he's always smiling, he's always happy, he's always dedicated, and he's like determined to be one of the best on the grid, even if he has to do it to Williams. And I respect the guy so much more than I ever did before. And knowing he goes through that is just kind of mind boggling. So
yeah.
more,
He's even keeled as hell. Helmut Marko said that he signed through 2025, so they probably don't have a shot at him. But Helmut Marko is also probably trying to pull some sort of strings to get that man back into the Red Bull family.
I actually don't know if he would go, even if he was offered.
I don't think so either. Yeah, honestly, I don't think so either. I think he has a certain kind of like moral compass that maybe not, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but I think he remembers how that experience went and exactly how he was let go of that team.
But listen,
Um,
like look, we'll get to Ferrari in a second, but look at where Ferrari has been in the Schumacher days and the days prior, dominant. Now where are they? And I think this sport has ebbs and flows, which has shown through the test of time. McLaren's been dominant. Then they were, Daniel Ricciardo and Lando in the back of the pack every week. And I think Aston Martin and now McLaren have given people that hope and that spark that, like, hey, maybe Williams will be a front runner team in a year or two. They have a new team principal who was one of the most important people at Mercedes during the dominant generations. And it's like you you might have that magic coming back, and it sort of seems like the sparks are forming. So, it always chasing the top versus being someone who's going to be at the top later might be a better play. And I think he might see that.
Yeah. So let's take a chance to talk about a team that is not instilling any kind of hope in people, Alpine. So Ocon out in lap 10. I'm not entirely sure what happened to his car. I think it was an engine failure. And then Gasly out in lap 46. Gasly actually had a really good competitive race going on, only about 0.5 to 0.6 seconds behind Alonso through probably like the second quarter of that entire race. Got hit by our best friend Lance Stroll.
Got
And
strolled.
yeah, he got strolled. He got strolled right out of the track. And then Stroll incurred I think damage to his front side, and that was it for him.
I mean, he
uh
also got like a 5 second penalty, which, like, from my understanding in previous years, like 5 years ago, would have been like a 10 grid penalty in the following race. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, what is 5 seconds have any kind of what kind of penalty is that for taking somebody out of a race and you're already out of the points? Like, it does nothing. So,
yeah.
like, I can't, I don't know if you remember, but like in 2020 or 2021, like there was all sorts of penalty. Like when Bottas went bowling in Hungary, he got like grid spot drops for the following race. I think a
Yeah, I
couple of
remember
times
that.
Leclerc got a couple of grid spot drops, and like it just doesn't seem like,
They almost took Gasly out of an entire race
yeah,
because he incurred so many penalties. That was the year that Danny Rick won Monza, right?
yeah. And I just like I feel like they're being kind of like a little too nice to, like, you're taking somebody out of a race who's having a decent race. Like,
Yeah, the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
exactly.
Yeah, I get that. No, I thought I had a similar feeling as well. I honestly thought Gasly was going to get in the P9, P8 area and stick right behind Alonso. He was having a great race. He was fucking pissed when Stroll came in and kind of nudged him out. I think it happened twice to Gasly throughout the race. And the second time around he got nicked by Stroll and it affected his car. But either way, Alpine just the worst outcome that you could think of. Both cars DNF. Haas, Magnussen's out in lap 33 due to I think the power unit that they were using was an old power unit and it just let out.
Yeah,
And
it
then
went to the end of its life.
yeah, which makes no sense to me. I mean, you can't be that strong on your budgets to where you can't have a new whatever the case is. Magnussen's out in lap 33, DNFs. Hulkenberg has a semi good race, but he is also pushed out by, I believe he's pushed out by Nick De Vries in lap 8, and Nick gets a 5 second penalty. Just to your point, like Hulkenberg was out 23 seconds after coming back in the pits after that. He had to make up a lot of spots to kind of get. I think where did he end up finishing?
Or are you talking
Uh,
about the front wing thing?
for Hulkenberg, yeah.
I
Yeah, he ended up finishing 13, and yeah, De Vries hit him on in lap 8.
pretty sure it was Sergio. What-
No,
I'd
no,
have to
no,
go.
it was Nick De Vries.
Oh, okay. I'd
Yeah,
have to
and
go
then
back and look.
he incurred a 5 second penalty for that as well.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Hulkenberg was already out to the pits within the first 10 laps, causing him to, and Haas's pit stops aren't really the fastest in the world. So I think it was like a 16, 17-second pit stop. By the time he came out, he was 22 seconds behind the last person. Luckily he was able to make it up, but yeah, Haas this week just didn't have it going on for them. Um, well, I'm sure you have a lot to say about Ferrari. I think specifically Sainz had a really bad luck for going on hards. and not being able to take full advantage of that yellow flag and the safety car. I have no idea what Ferrari was thinking, putting both their drivers on hards when they clearly saw, the softs was serving George, and the mediums would have probably been able to, they
Actually,
would have been able to execute a two stopper. Yeah, what were you saying, Chris?
but I think Leclerc was on mediums at the end, if I remember correctly, and Sainz had a moment. So what happened was is the VSC came out and they pitted under VSC, which by the way, I don't think it should have ever been a VSC. Where the car was on track, on fire, like you're gonna have to get a tractor in there, get a crane. So I think that they just need to snap safety cars so people know exactly what they're dealing with for these pit stops. But Signs went on to hards, um, thinking
Yeah,
that
Leclerc went on to hards in lap 19, and then I think went to mediums during
oh
the
gotcha.
the yellow, yeah, during the yellow flag. But by that time they had enough, like Ferrari strategists and engineers had enough time to see how the softs, mediums, and hards were affecting everyone on the grid. And they saw everyone going on to either softs or mediums. They saw Russell do 29 laps on track, and keep and be faster than them essentially. So why would you then put signs on hards to finish
Yeah,
the race?
that mind
It
boggled me. And then
I
once we went from VSC to safety car, I don't know if you remember this, but Signs like got into like a little debate with his engineer and was like, "Should I
what's
pit?
plan?
Yeah, what
They
should
were
I
like,
pit
what's
again?"
they're like, hey, do you remember plan four? And he's like, no, I
Yeah,
don't remember plan four. What happened to plan two and three?
yeah. He's like, and then the guy was like, I don't know, I'll tell you later. And then, but yeah, no, like Signs basically let the engineer make the decision about whether he would pit again. Because if he pit again, he loses more track positions by getting on the softs or the mediums. And ultimately, they decided to keep him out of hards. But yeah, like I don't know what's going on with Ferrari. They're, they're my hot seat for this week. Like Ferrari is a mess. Like they started the race fourth and fifth and end the race in freaking ninth and 10th. Like
Yeah,
that's you
it's
know
unexcusable
we have
or
Piastri,
inexcusable.
and McLaren starting the race in third and ending in fourth. Like it's not just the VSC or the safety car screwing these guys. The strategists, everything that they're doing just sort of seems to be incoherent. Uh, Also, Leclerc and Sainz seem to be at butts with each other. I don't know if you saw this, but during quali, like they have an order to themselves and they decide that order week by week. And Leclerc was supposed to be in front every week, and Sainz kept bitching about it on team radio. And so Sainz had to move over and let Leclerc get ahead in the pit lane. And Sainz was like, "Why are you making me do this? Like
Oh yeah,
this ruins my tires." And then Sainz, in the little kerfuffle right at the end of one of the qualifying sessions, passed Charles right before the start line. And Charles got on the team radio and was like, "Oh, nice move, nice moves, Carlos. Like overtake me in the
yeah.
last turn." Like they obviously don't get along. Which, if you're not gonna like, you need that team camaraderie to like do something like Norris and Piastri did today, where they work so well together. And if you're butting heads with the engineers, you're butting heads with your team, and you're butting heads with your teammate, like unless you're in a Red Bull and you're Max Verstappen, you're not going to win races. So
I
again,
I I, I saw that, and I think they tried their best for, because they're only human, right? At a
yeah,
certain point, when the team is so frustrating, like, and you're naturally like competing with your teammate, by and large, that's gonna seep down in the ugliest ways. And then now, like your teammates are like, you're in the worst case scenario where your team, like where your I guess like your star players are like fighting each other. Is that what happened to Kobe and Shaq? And you know how that turned out, rest in peace, Kobe. But eh, you just can't have two dying stars like just near each other, right? Like it's a goddamn black hole.
yep,
So Ferrari, I don't know what's going on. I think they might just need two Italian drivers so they could just speak in Italian the entire time. And maybe there's something, maybe something's lost in translation, right? Like I have no idea like what it is. Like they have all the infrastructure that they need. They have like two like fast drivers, they just can't seem to get it together, and I'm gonna chalk it up to miscommunication and language barrier at this point.
I'm also going to
Uh,
go ahead and say that Fred Vasseur was not the answer, and he's had plenty of time to make some changes. Not much has changed, and we called it at the beginning of the season. Alfa Romeo was a nowhere team, and you got your team principal who did nothing with that team except bring Valtteri Bottas on, who I guess is checked out of the sport. And now, there's nothing changing at Ferrari. There's no positive progress being made, seemingly. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know. I did you see the picture of Toto Wolff talking with Charles in the pit lane or in the paddock? And I was like, what are they talking about? And everyone was like commenting, like Toto was saying, "Don't sign your extension, buddy." We'll find you another home. Like, you know,
It's like,
uh,
did you see we have Brad Pitt here? Like,
yeah,
I'm sure he was like, we're doing this entire movie to get you to come over here to our paddock and talk to us and talk to Brad. And, it's I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing Charles in a Mercedes, but I just don't ever want to see Lewis Hamilton leave the sport. Um, Another, and you mentioned this on my hot seat this week. It's Ferrari, but also Checo. Another week of underqualifying or underperforming in quali, and then making this, having to scrap his way through to the front. I chronicled his race again, and it was definitely less impressive than last week, because he didn't finish in, anywhere near podium. And I'm starting to feel like doing poorly in qualifying and then scrapping your way through positions in the actual race is becoming less and less impressive. Um, what are your thoughts on Perez? Do you see a future with him still here? What do you think? There's a second, driver that could come in and kind of give him some scare.
yeah. I think Checo, this might be his last year. I don't know. I mean, I think after he won Monaco last year, he got a 2-year extension, I believe, to his contract. But we've already seen with guys like Danny Rick, your contract doesn't mean much, especially with a guy like Helmut Marko who pulls all the strings in the world. So, um, yeah, I think if this continues for Checo, um, the chemistry is not there, the team dynamic is not there. Max, um, I think he's fine with Checo sometimes as a human being, but I don't think he particularly likes Checo as a teammate. Every time that he gets brought up to Max, that he's just like, I could kind of do this on my own. I don't really, because someone asked him about the constructors championship, and they're like, "Are you worried about Sergio not performing?" And Max is like, "I could do this by myself. It's fine." Like, that's not
Yeah,
something you
it's
want your
not like he
teammate
has
saving.
Lance Stroll on his team.
Yeah, but you know, I Checo's been super unimpressive. And he's only really good when Max has a bad weekend. Um, so yeah, I think if there's an opportunity for someone like a Leclerc or someone like a Sainz who want to get out of their current position, because I don't think Red Bull's just going to pick up anybody, but if they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to get a good number two driver in that seat, I think that they will over Checo.
Yeah, I just don't think they'll open up that D2 spot to a developing driver. I don't think they'll give it to Yuki. I think the train has kind of passed for Danny Rick, for that seat. As you know, as optimistic as you want to be, I think, Danny Rick is kind of a little bit too old for that seat, and there's been a couple of years where he's hasn't been fully driving an F1 car. So I think, just kind of knowing the Red Bull kind of business structure, they're probably going to want to go for safe over experimental. But that leaves,
Nick DeVries,
yeah,
just put him in the seat.
yeah, Christian Horner actually admitted, or Helman Marko admitted to him and Christian Horner disagreeing on bringing on Nick DeVries in the first place. Apparently, Christian wasn't a big fan, and say what you will about Christian, and I have said a lot about Christian Horner. That man is astute as fuck when it comes to picking talent and like understanding like where actual growth is gonna be and what to put his attention on. And I'm starting to believe him more and more. So I'd be curious to see who he's eyeballing. I know that Alex was one person that he was sweet talking, but again, I like to to your point earlier, I don't know if he's going to want to even go back into the Red Bull family. So someone like a Carlos Sainz, he was in the Red Bull family for a little while, so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see him make a full roundabout. I think, it'd be a less contentious relationship with him going to Red Bull than it is with him at Ferrari right now. And silly season's coming up, so we'll have an episode for that, but just fun to toss around in your head.
Yep.
Let's talk off track for a little bit, Chris. So the the Brad Pitt movie is gonna be, all around town, and coming from the industry and our beloved CAA. This was probably packaged by CAA, given Brad Pitt's acting in it, Damson Idris is in it, and then it's going to be produced by Jerry Bruckheimer with Hamilton serving as a producer. You excited for this, Chris?
I don't know. That's my answer
I'm
because
kind of right there with you.
there's I don't did you watch the interview clip with Martin Brundle and Brad Pitt? Um
Yeah, yeah.
Brad Pitt actually kind of gave a lot about the plot away. Um he basically told the whole story, which is like Brad Pitt's an older driver who got into some sort of accident, um which took him out of the sport, and he started racing in some other disciplines, and then this new team uh basically has a backmarker team. They've never scored a point, and I think the team principal is Javier Bardem, or I think is who's playing it. But then they basically get the new rookie, I forget his name. You mentioned Damson Idris, and
Yeah.
they basically ask his old buddy, who is Brad Pitt, who used to race, to come and sort of like mentor and be that guy. And I really hope that, because like it's like the way we know the way F1 works, that you can't just take a Williams and put Max Verstappen in like the Nikita Mazepin's Haas, and all of a sudden you're winning championships. It just doesn't work like that. So I really hope
They keep it
that
within the realm of possibility.
I hope they don't take a backmarker car that's never made a point and get this like retired driver come in and just destroy the championship. Um, so I'm a little worried that they're going to Hollywood it a bit too much. I think with Lewis being a part of it, they might not. And it seems to have a little bit of parallels with Lewis's, a young, hot rookie who's going to be played by Damson. And just like, hopefully, I think it's going to mirror a little bit of Lewis's life. So hopefully, there's a little bit of realism. But the other thing I'm worried about is that they filmed at Silverstone this weekend, which is full of F1 cars, and they're going to do a lot of F1 shots. But the car that they're driving is an F2 car, so it's going
But
to
they
look.
made it look like a F1 car.
Eh, does it?
I mean, people thought people. I mean, the major consensus that it looks cool, like the car looks cool, that
It does.
their outfit looks cool, and I'm sure they're not about to shell out a F1 car that's worth multi-million dollars to like just do these like shots. They're probably gonna get a couple $100,000, get like a F2 car retrofitted to look like a F1 car, and no one knows the difference.
I'm curious if they plan on filming at more races throughout the rest of this year, because
I
you
think that is
know,
the plan.
yeah, I was gonna say like how much footage can you get from like one installation lap around the track with other
Maybe
cars on the track?
maybe we'll see them at Coda.
Maybe we will.
Maybe.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super formulaic. I think that's exactly what it'll be. It'll be like a Gridiron Gangs or a Coach Carter, or like, like, hey coach, I'm a young and up and coming rock star, but I need guidance, I need guidance from the best. And then the old guy comes off of his like retirement, like the longest yard kind of shit.
Hey man, I have a
So
guilty pleasure,
I love those
movie.
kinds of
Well,
I love those kinds of movies. You
it,
know
Da-
exactly what to expect.
Days of Thunder, man.
Yeah.
The old, you know, the young rookie Tom Cruise comes in, and then they go get the super old retired ex racer coach to come teach him how to race, like, and then he wins the championship or whatever, and it's like it's super guilty pleasure.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah,
It's a
so
classic, and it's produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, so you know what you're getting.
yeah.
So when you put it through that perspective, probably going to be a decent movie. If you're trying to like get like an art house like noir like Darren Aronofsky thing going, probably not so much.
Hey,
So
listen, give me
yeah,
the basic plot. Give me the stereotypical run of the mill,
that
come in, save
swelling
the day.
orchestral, yeah,
Yeah,
like
give me
score that
that.
comes in.
The only thing I ask is
An absent father, yeah.
make the race believable, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, and then make sure Javier Bardem gets a lot of screen time because as soon as that happens, it's probably going to be an Oscar contender.
Yeah,
That man, that
100%.
man is that man is amazing.
Yep.
Well, that's all we have for this week, Chris. Hungary is going to be the next race, going to be on July 23rd, with qualifying the days before. Who are you predicting to win?
I mean, there's no way that I'm ever betting against Max this year. It doesn't matter what the race is, until we see a blunder or his car blow up. I think Max is going to win the rest of them. He's just a robot. And then, you know, uh, I think Mercedes is on the up and up. And I want to put Lewis up there, but I'm going to go ahead and put George because George did have a really good race today, and he was another sort of like casualty of maybe the VSC, and a little bit of Lewis got the benefit of that. So I'll put George, and then I'm going to go ahead and cross my fingers and say that McLaren has figured out this recipe, and they're going to put Norris back on the podium for a second time this year. So Max, George, and Lando.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you about Max. I think he's just going to take a run away with this, get his seventh win in a row. I am gonna be optimistic about Carlos Sainz. I am really hoping one of the drivers for Ferrari just says, "Hey, I am not gonna listen to you guys anymore. I am gonna pretend to listen to you guys and go on my own tire strategy, and I'm just gonna trust myself and do it. And whenever you try to communicate anything on the radio, I'm gonna ignore you." I'm
That
really hoping that because that honestly seems like what's gonna the driver's intuition is gonna be way better for them. I think now than the engineers are. I think they distrust their engineers and their strategists, and I'm really hoping one of them. And I'm thinking it's gonna be Sainz before Leclerc. I think he's less of a company man to just go wild card and just do the damn thing.
could you
So I
imagine if the way Ferrari would look if Carlos at the beginning of the race just said, "This is what I'm doing. I'm going to tell you what I'm pitting. I'm going to tell you what tires, and I'm just going to come in the pit box." And he did all that. He called all the shots from the car, and he
and
like
he got
Cody.
P10. He got P10.
Yeah, but like nothing changes. It'd be kind of funny. But yeah, like
That'd be hilarious.
if he did that in podiums, like how bad Ferrari would look. But yeah, I could definitely. I'm agreeing with you that I definitely could see Signs making his own decisions, and but yeah, hopefully, like you said, he ends up on the podium next week.
Yeah, I mean, I felt bad for the guy. I just don't understand hard tire. I don't. So I got Mac, Carlos, and Hamilton. I think Hamilton has found a good stride. Really tough, not tough drive, but really strong drive from him today. I think he was nipping at the back ends of Norris, and the McLaren had a lot of speed today. But we'll see. I still want to see if it's a week over week thing or if it was just like a flash in the pan for them. But yeah, that'll be my top three: Max, Carlos, and Hamilton.
Yeah, definitely excited for it. Hopefully it's a little wet. We could see some more Bottas bowling, although he won't be at the front of the pack to take him out. But yeah, Hungary should be a good race. It's another good track. Um, and that run up to turn one, potential for some chaos, which we haven't seen much of this year, but maybe somebody will take Max out and we'll have a big shuffle. But yeah, definitely excited for it. Good race this week. Unfortunately, we have another week off, but Hungary will be back talking about the race, and we'll see where all these upgrades for all these teams put them. See where Aston, McLaren, and Mercedes end up, and if anybody can finally take it to Red Bull.
Yeah, highly doubted, but I always love seeing the back of the pack nowadays more than I do the front of the pack. So I'd love to see what kind of turmoil these AlphaTauris and Alfa Romeos get into, and then how Williams kind of skirt around them. So more to come. It was great watching this week with you, Chris. Any last thoughts on who is going to be the losers for next week in Hungary?
I mean, I think Ferrari's going to continue their bad strategy, especially in a race like Hungary.
Say Nick DeVries.
I mean, I think Nick DeVries is out of the seat in a couple
I
weeks.
totally agree with you, Chris. So we'll talk more about that after Hungary. But yeah, until then, have a good night, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for listening. Yeah.